Today we're going to talk about financial planning and analysis, translating strategy into numbers and numbers into insight. We will explore the discipline that sits at the heart of modern finance leadership, financial planning and analysis. And that is commonly known in company jargon as FP&A. This is where strategy meets arithmetic, where ambitious visions are tested against the economic reality, and with the CFO, they transform from a recorder of history into a shaper of the future. If you think of the finance function as having two fundamental modes, there is one, and you're looking backward, and that comprises accounting, reporting, ensuring that the numbers are accurate and compliant. The other is looking forward. And you're planning, you're forecasting, you're analyzing what might happen and what ought to happen, what should happen. FP&A is a forward-looking discipline, and in today's rapidly changing business environment, it has never been more important. So let me start with the annual budget, because this is where most FP&A conversations actually begin. The budget is a financial expression of your company's operating plan for the coming year. It translates strategic intentions into specific numbers. How much revenue do you expect to generate? What it will cost to produce your products or deliver your services? How much you'll spend on sales and marketing? What investments you'll make in R&D? What investments will you make in infrastructure? And ultimately, what profit do you expect to earn? So the budgeting process, when done well, is far more than a financial exercise. It forces the entire organization to think carefully about priorities and trade-offs. It creates an alignment around goals. It establishes the benchmarks against which performance will be measured. A good budget is a contract. It's a contract between the company and its stakeholders. And this contract is about what it intends to accomplish. All the stakeholders. What do they intend to accomplish? But I must be honest with you about something. Traditional annual budgeting has significant limitations, and recognizing these limitations is essential for any CFO who wants to lead effectively. The first limitation is that the world is changing a lot faster than the annual cycles. A budget created in October for the following calendar year is based on assumptions about customers, about competitors, about markets, about economic conditions. But it could very well be that by March or April, many of those assumptions may already be obsolete. And yet the organization, they continue to be measured against a plan that no longer reflects reality. And this creates a dysfunction. Either people ignore the budget because it's irrelevant, or they make poor decisions trying to hit targets that no longer make sense. The second limitation is that traditional budgeting often consumes enormous amounts of time and energy. In many organizations, the annual budget process, it takes 3 to 4 months and involves hundreds of people. And they are preparing detailed spreadsheets and negotiating with finance. They're revising and re-revising numbers. And this is the time that could be spent serving customers. This is the time that could be spent developing products or improving operations. And at the end of this exhausting process, the budget is often wrong anyway. The third limitation is that budgets can encourage counterproductive behaviors. When bonuses and evaluations, they depend on hitting budget targets, people naturally focus on negotiating achievable targets rather than stretching for what is truly possible. Sandbagging, you know what that is? Deliberately underestimating potential performance to make targets easier to hit. That becomes rational behavior, and once those targets are set, there is often the reluctance to adjust them, even when the circumstances clearly warranted. These limitations have led many organizations to adopt alternative approaches, and I want to discuss the most important of these, the rolling forecast. A rolling forecast. That is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of creating one annual budget, and you're sticking with that for 12 months, you continuously update your forecast, and you do so typically looking at 4 to 6 quarters into the future. And each month or quarter, as actual results are coming in, you revise your projections for the remaining periods and add a new period at the end of the horizon. Think of it this way. With a traditional annual budget in January, you have 12 months of forecast ahead of you. 12 months. By November, you only have 2 months of visibility remaining until the new budget kicks in. Now, with a rolling forecast, what happens? You always have the same planning horizon. It's tight. It's pretty frozen, right? But dynamic. You're always looking 18 months ahead, for example, regardless of what month you're in. And the benefits of the rolling forecast are substantial. They force regular reassessment of the assumptions, so your projections are staying connected to reality. They are providing consistent forward visibility for decision making. They reduce the gamesmanship around annual target setting. Why? Because targets are continuously being refreshed. And they also distribute the forecasting workload throughout the year rather than concentrating it in an exhausting annual crunch that happens during an annual budget exercise. But rolling forecasts are not without challenges. They require more sophisticated systems and processes to manage the continuous updating. They can create uncertainty for employees who prefer fixed annual targets, and they demand that leadership be very comfortable with ambiguity and with change. And not every organization is ready for this approach, and that's okay. That's acceptable. But the key is to understand the trade-offs and choose the method that fits your culture, the capabilities, and the demands that the market makes on you. Regardless of whether you use traditional budgets, rolling forecast, or some hybrid approach, variance analysis is essential. Variance analysis is simply the comparison of what? The actual results to planned results, along with the investigation and explanation of the differences. Why did that happen? And this sounds straightforward, but effective variance analysis is more nuanced than it first appears, by the way. The goal is not merely to document that you missed your revenue target by 3% or exceeded your cost budget by a certain amount. That's not the goal here. The goal is to understand why, and to be able to extract those insights that inform future decisions. So when you're analyzing variances, I encourage you to think in layers. Start with the highest level, total revenue, total expenses, operating profit. And then you drill down into the components. Was the revenue variance driven by volume? Are you selling more or fewer units than you had planned? Or was it price, achieving higher or lower prices per unit that's changing the impact on the revenue? Each of these are going to tell you, or a combination of these are going to tell you a different story. A volume shortfall might indicate market share loss or weaker overall demand. A price variance might reflect competitive pressure or successful premium positioning. A mixed variance might suggest shifting customer preferences to sales force behavior. The same total variance could have completely different implications depending on its underlying drivers. Try to understand those drivers, those underlying drivers. Very important. On the expenses side, apply similar rigor. Separate variances that were within management's control from those that were not. Did we spend more on marketing because we chose to invest in a new campaign, or because media costs simply increased unexpectedly? Did labor costs rise because we hired more people than planned, or because the wage rates exceeded our assumptions? Understanding the root causes of the variances, it enables you to meaningfully make good decisions. It creates accountability and better future planning. I want to share a perspective on variance analysis that's often missed. The purpose is not to assign blame. If variance analysis becomes a monthly exercise in finding who to criticize, people will quickly learn to avoid accountability by setting conservative targets. They will start to hide information, or they will make excuses. Their purpose is to learn, to understand what is happening in the business, and to improve future performance. That's the reason why you want to have variance analysis. You have it set up for the right intent and the right application. The best finance leaders I've worked with approach variance analysis with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. They will ask questions like, what did we learn from this? What did we learn this month? What surprised us? What should we do differently going forward? And this creates a culture where people are willing to share honest assessments rather than defensive explanations. Let me now discuss what I consider the highest value activity in FP&A, forward-looking analysis that informs strategic decisions. And this is where the finance moves from scorekeeping to partnership. Now consider the kinds of questions that arise in any business. Should we enter a new market? Should we launch this product? Should we acquire this company? Should we expand this facility or maybe even outsource production? Should we invest in this technology? Now you see, these are all strategic questions with profound financial implications, and FP&A has a critical role in informing them. Effective strategic analysis begins with understanding the decision at hand and the key uncertainties that are surrounding it. What are the major assumptions that will determine whether this initiative succeeds or fails? Is it customer adoption? Is it our ability to execute operationally? Is it competitive response? How about, is it macroeconomic conditions? Identifying these critical assumptions helps you to focus the analysis on what matters most. And then you model the financial implications under different scenarios. What does success look like in financial terms? What does failure look like? What does a middle ground outcome look like? How sensitive are the results to changes in key assumptions? At what point does a decision flip from attractive to unattractive? And it is this kind of scenario and sensitivity analysis that transforms the abstract strategic discussions into concrete financial terms that can be debated and can be evaluated. I want to emphasize something important here. The value of this analysis is not in producing a single number, a projected return on investment or a net present value. The value is in the thinking process and in the conversations it enables. And when the leadership, they understand the assumptions behind the numbers, when the leadership understands the scenarios that could unfold and the sensitivities that matter most, they can make better decisions. They can also set the appropriate milestones and decision points as the initiatives unfold. So let me offer some practical guidance now. For building an effective FP&A function, first invest in the right people. FP&A, they require a combination of technical, financial skills, business acumen, analytical capability, and communication ability. And the best FP&A professionals understand the business deeply. They know how the products are made. They understand how the customers are acquired. They understand how the operations function. And they're able to translate between the language of finance and the language of operations. And these people are rare, but they're extremely valuable. So recruit carefully and develop them with a lot of intention. Invest in them. Then you have to invest in systems rather than enable these FP&A professionals to succeed. Too many FP&A teams, they spend their time wrestling with spreadsheets, reconciling data, manually consolidating information. This leaves little time for actual analysis and insight. So use those modern planning systems that can automate much of this mechanical work, freeing your team to focus on understanding and advising the business. Their technology investment, they often pay for itself quickly in improved productivity and in better decisions. Third, you want to build strong relationships across the organization. FP&A cannot function in isolation. Your forecasts, they depend on input. They depend on input from sales, from operations, from marketing, from human resources, and other functions. And your analysis must be informed by their expertise and relevant to their decisions. Cultivate these relationships deliberately. Spend time understanding what other leaders need from finance. Make yourself useful to them. The more FP&A is seen as a partner rather than a policing function, the more effectively it will be. You're setting them up for success. Fourth, focus on insight, not just information. It's easy. It's very easy to produce voluminous reports full of numbers, but it's much harder to extract the insights that matter and present them in ways that drive action. Challenge your team to answer the question, so what? What does this data mean? What should we do about it? push for deeper analysis, and that leads to recommendations, not just observations. And finally, create a framework where there is intellectual honesty. The pressure to present favorable numbers can be intense, and especially when leadership wants to see good news. But an FP&A function that tells people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear is worse and useless, is dangerous. Your credibility depends on being the source of truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Present reality clearly, acknowledge uncertainty honestly, and let leadership make informed decisions based on accurate information. Now, FP&A done well is one of the most intellectually engaging and impactful disciplines in corporate finance. It sits at the intersection. It sits at the intersection of strategy. It sits at the intersection of strategy and execution, of ambition and reality, of the future and the present. And the CFO who builds a strong FP&A capability, they create enormous value for the organization, not by having all the answers, but by asking the right questions, by providing the analysis to inform the decisions, and holding up a clear mirror to what is actually happening in the business. I hope you have enjoyed this session, and I will continue on with several other video series for corporate finance. And if you have any questions, comments, please put a note at the bottom of this video. And I will use your notes to shape and reshape and chisel my presentation going forward to make it more valuable for you, my audience. Take care. Bye-bye.